So thanks for coming, everybody. Glad to be back. It's kind of like, I feel like Randy, what's his name, Randy Quaid from Independence Day, when he's like, hello, boys, I'm back, right before he goes right up the ship. So when I first talked to Dale about this presentation, I kind of thought, I work with this stuff every day. I'm getting pretty good with it. Maybe I can use my expertise to offer advice and talk about, maybe how you can recognize trends and how to evaluate vendor AI claims. And then part of this the process was to go and talk to vendors and go to vendor presentations and see what everybody's doing. That kind of changed things a bit. That some of these were bad. So first of all, how many of you have gone to these vendor presentations, and some are good and some are bad, but you're always kind of wondering, hey, is this for real? Is it really going to do anything? Actually, better question. Maybe I should have started with this. How many think Skynet's coming? How many think Terminators are going to take over the world, right? Okay. And here's my favorite question, because I'll tell you in a minute, but how many are looking forward to our AI overlords? Yes. Yeah? So just so you know, I'm the president of the AI Overlord Welcoming Committee, okay? So, but going to and look, they're not all bad. I'm not gonna call anybody out, okay? Because when I go and talk about some of the things that are bad, I gotta look at some of you this entire conference, and I don't want my drink roofied again. That's not cool, okay, Brian? All right, so some of the things that I've seen kind of changed my idea a little bit of how I should do this. And so part of what I want to do is pull back the curtain a little bit, like the man behind the green curtain there, and expose some of the smoke and mirrors. Talk about some of the things that people do and why they do it, and then let's talk about how to evaluate the claims and what should we be using this for, as in not the art of the possible, but let's talk about really what can it really do and why should it be doing it. But first, this is probably a common scene. So when I say this is the worst presentation I've ever seen, probably maybe besides this one, but the worst presentation I've ever seen was not just one. There were multiple vendors that I've seen do this. So they advertise that they're going to talk about using AI in OT, using AI in whatever. And in the presentation description is kind of hyped up with, we're going to talk about techniques, we're going to talk about this. I'm going in there expecting to learn something, and when I get there, instead, it's talking, the presentation is referring to all of the different categories of cybersecurity, threat detection and vulnerability management and all this, and then they simply just say, well, this is something that AI can help with, and move on. No kidding. That is literally what these presentations are doing. I don't learn anything. It's a big advertisement. And so I'm sick of all the advertisements of just saying, hey, I'm using AI, I'm using AI, I'm using AI, but what's the value, okay? And so the other thing that I'm seeing out there, and you'll see this in a minute when I talk about kind of the smoke and mirrors, is because generative AI, this ChatGPT came out in 2022, right, late 2022. And so what's happening is it became really easy to implement a chatbot. So now some vendors are just kind of including a chatbot and let you ask cybersecurity questions. And it's general, it's not tied to your assets or anything like that, but there's some vendors that, and just let's be fair, when I talk about vendors, it's gonna be easier to make a list of vendors that aren't claiming they're using AI now, okay? So it's not like I'm singling anybody out. So, but just including a chatbot and saying, we're AI powered, it's not AI powered, okay? So those are kind of like the two biggest offenses that I'm seeing out there. But what's more important is this presentation shouldn't even happen. This presentation is stupid that I have to be out here talking about this presentation, because whether or not we use AI, you use AI in a product, it shouldn't matter. Why? Why are we using AI as a hook in marketing other than it's a hook for marketing? it's the Gartner buzzword, the magic triangle, whatever. Why? Because the bottom line is, does the product work or not? Does my product work better than this vendor? That's kind of adversarial marketing, but that's what marketing is. But does my product provide you a value, and does it work? And then maybe when the customer says, well, how does it work? How are you doing this, right? Then you talk about, well, we're using machine learning, or we're using generative AI. Okay? Think about it. Whenever it comes to your other products, your EDRs and things like that, right? When you're looking for EDR, and some of you may do this, but when you're looking for an EDR, do you sit there and talk about, well, can you explain the heuristics to me? Can you explain exactly the algorithms that you're using? That's really not part of the conversation for most of you. For the most part, you want to know, does it work? Are my peers using it? You want to know these things, right? And there's not a vendor out there that I know of that's out there saying, hey, try our XDR, try our EDR, because we're using such and such heuristics and we're doing this. No, they advertise kind of like what it does and why it helps you. And that's what we should be doing with AI. And so this is not new. We've seen the buzzword, the AI buzzword used before, right? I mean, when everybody started using machine learning, everybody's like AI powered, we're using AI, And to be fair, there are vendors out there using AI and machine language successfully, and it really is helping, right? I think like one of the first vendors, maybe NOT, I think was Cylance before they were bought by BlackBerry. I think, they were using machine learning, and I think, Nozomi has been using it for a while for categorization and classification and stuff like that. And there's others out there. I'm not like getting paid much to say any of this for these vendors, but if you think about it, rather than in this industry, right? Instead of saying we're powered by AI, wouldn't it be better to say we're automated? Wouldn't it be better to say our threat detection or this is automated? We're an automation industry. That's really kind of what we should be saying. And to be fair, at least from where I'm seeing, AI almost is starting to have a negative connotation, right? I mean, we're kind of starting to see where, maybe you shouldn't be using AI in your marketing. I don't know. I just lost 3 customers saying that. Sorry. But so real quick, just want to make sure for context of this presentation, we are talking about the generative AI, okay? Because that's the hype. So let's just get that out of the way. Machine learning has been around for a while. It is being used, and it's pretty effective for classification and grouping and heuristics and all that. But now, because of generative AI, when generative AI came out, and it's like ChatGPT, and then Claude, and so now we have AI everything because it's so easy, right? So we are talking about the generative AI claims, right? And so what vendors, and I already covered this, I already spoiled my surprise, but yeah, so what vendors are claiming to use? Well, who are they? It's pretty much everybody, right? I mean, almost everybody. And look, I'll throw some love Dragos' way, because and there are the other companies that have taken the stance, but like Dragos took the stance that they said, you know what, we're not ready. We don't think the industry's ready for generative AI yet. And so we're going to keep doing what we do, and we're going to evaluate it. And we're going to, we might use it, but right now, we're good at what we do, how we do it. And that's fair. I respect that. But I also respect the companies that are trying to implement generative AI to add value. But it is almost everybody. You're hard-pressed to find those companies that are saying, we're not doing it. And for those that aren't doing it, cool. If you are doing it, cool. But do it right. All right. And so if you look at where people are using generative AI or claiming to use generative AI, it's all over the board. But I would say the most use cases they typically tend to be in the middle range there, the secure AI operations, like a Copilot, right? Ever since Microsoft announced their security Copilot kind of thing, that's kind of what everybody's reaching for. But it's anywhere from risk and compliance management, threat vulnerability management, red teaming, tabletop exercises. And so where you're not really seeing it yet, I'm not seeing people use it, I take that back. People are using traditional AI for like application security. I think Stuart McClure's company is doing that. But for the most part, it's kind of all over the board. And I think it's all over the board because nobody really knows how to implement it yet. So how should we go about evaluating generative claims? What do we need to look for? And so before you can really start, you need to understand, ask yourself, and you need to educate yourself on and that's not this talk, so really on what generative AI can do, the art of the possible, how is it really a value. The on-ramp talk that Jeffrey had earlier today was a good first part to this talk. So if you didn't see that, whenever the videos come out, go and watch that. It's kind of a good intro to this. It's like part 2. But so understand what it can and can't do, what extent, understand what it's capable of and what it's not, because some of these gotchas are vendors trying to do things where they're actually not capable. And so, but ultimately, and this is the question that Dale posed to me, which was like, okay, fine, you got people that are doing things improperly or these are hyped, but what does better look like? How can this actually be better? How can generative AI actually help? And what questions should you be asking the vendors? And okay, fine, you're claiming this to make your product better, so how? And I'll get to that in a few slides. Well, first, let's take a look at some of the fun stuff. The smoke and mirrors and the tricks that vendors use to say, I'm doing this thing, I'm doing AI, and now I'm AI powered. And how do I know vendors do this? Because this is how I used to do some of this crap, right? So when I was first learning this stuff and I first developing products, yeah, I was doing this thing, but to be fair, I thought I was doing it right? Some vendors may be doing it this way because they don't know any better. Some are doing it maliciously. But yeah, I did this. First version of Auto Tabletop was like one big prompt and just doing all the stuff. And I'm like, holy crap, it worked. Product. So that's kind of how a lot of products evolve, right? And I'll tell you the truth. That's exactly how my product was created. So that's what it is. One prompt to rule them all, okay? And that is the biggest thing that most vendors are doing is they're feeding all this crap into one prompt, sending it to the LLM and praying they get something useful back and it doesn't hallucinate. And there's tricks you can do to keep it from hallucinating, but that's what it is. And so, that's one question, and we'll get to the questions in a minute, but that's one question you ask a vendor is, it's like, are you using multi-agents to divide up the workload? Is it one prompt? Is this just a chatbot? So one big prompt that, I guess I should have flipped the slides earlier, but ultimately, vendors, instead of using one prompt, they should be using multi-agent systems or different functions, different agents that divide up the workload, that each have different tasks because they can have specialized agents that, this one is responsible for cybersecurity, this is responsible for general chat. This one knows about your assets, this one can do contextual analysis, okay? So that helps the accuracy and that makes it more production ready, okay? And also, and I made this mistake in the beginning, which was feeding it a whole bunch of crap and expecting it to analyze it all, okay? That doesn't work. And the more information you give it, the more hallucinations you're gonna get, the less accurate it is. So ultimately, you need to divide it up into bite-sized chunks and do as much pre-processing as possible, okay? So that's a hint to the vendors out there. So AI can't do everything. Give it some help. Do the work up front and only give it what it needs. All right. So using cloud-based frontier models, right? Frontier models are your big ones like OpenAI and Anthropic and Claude, and all your data goes out there in the cloud, okay? Maybe secure, maybe not. Probably not. So even in Azure, right? So you can use private versions in Azure, and there's ways to secure it, but it's something you need to be aware of, right? Instead of using local models, where everything's local and private and your data doesn't go anywhere, you need to be aware, are vendors just sending all my data out to OpenAI, okay? And then yes, I was using the Azure version of OpenAI, you can secure it easier, you can secure better. By the way, if you fine tune an OpenAI model and put it in private cloud in Azure, it is more secure because now that's your private model. The public doesn't access it. Only you access it, and it stays at steady state, so you don't have drift, okay? Not Tokyo drift, but prompt drift, okay? All right. So using off-the-shelf foundation models, okay? So unlike using frontier models, the big public ones that go out to the cloud, there are local models, okay? So these local models like Llama, don't anybody say, What's the recent one came out? DeepSeek, don't say it, all right? Told you not to say it, all right? So, by the way, there's another model out there that's produced also by the same, well, that's Alibaba, which is Quinn. Here's the thing, and I may get crap for saying this, but just because a model comes from a location or an area that you may not trust, if the model is 100% local and you're using it locally, you're not going out to the service, because there's two different versions of DeepSeek, right? There's the model you can download and use locally, and there's an online service, like their version of ChatGPT, okay? If you're using your local model, nobody can do anything to it, right? If you find any shenanigans in the responses, you can fine tune that out, right? And so local models are relatively fine to use no matter where they're from. But you can check the integrity of the models, the bias of the models. You can check all these, right? You can check these with different tools. There's a whole bunch of them here, but you can ask the vendors, are you using a tool that checks the weights, the balances, the accuracies, and all of that? And these tools are like LangChain Langsmith, which is open source and free, Luminova, and I have this is weights and balances, but it helps developers build their prompts and train their models, and you see the accuracy and you see all this. And this information can at least be shared in part to customers, even if you don't want to share proprietary information, but this gives a level of validation on model quality and security and all this that you can use. So you have weights and balances, you have Langsmith, which does the same thing. Luminova is a commercial application that I've used in the past. I don't have a screenshot because, I'm not a customer anymore. Sorry, Luminova. But there's a new one that just came out, so Pydantic. I talk about Pydantic almost like obsessively in my yesterday's talk at B-Sides, but they have a new one out called Pydantic Logfire, I think. So anyway, lots of ways to check that vendors are validating their models. Bye, Patrick. All right, so and I talked about this one earlier. So basic chatbot functionality is just throwing it out there and saying, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, we've got this model here. You can ask a series of security questions, but that doesn't make your application AI powered, right? It's questionable value, especially if they haven't done anything to actually augment it with knowledge, retrieval augmented generation, that kind of thing. And so, using mainly only local, if you're going out to the frontier models, then you start running into problems. So be leery about just chatbot functionality without verifying what it's actually doing. Is it specific to your assets, to your environment? And then, hard coding specific values and data and rules. But a lot of the times, what'll happen is, and I know this because I did this accidentally, is that rather than having AI agents make contextual decisions on data routing and stuff like that, or making agent routing decisions, actually hard coding what's right, what's wrong, what's false. So you're overriding the agent's decision making. So whenever you have your flow charts of your application flow, and you have your diamond dependencies there, your gates, your checkpoints, and when it's okay, check this value, true or false or whatever, or check this value for some word, and when you hard code those values, you're overriding the capabilities of your agents, of your AI, and instead you've turned it into just a waterfall flow regular application. And so what you want your agents for, what you want AI to do, is to make more contextual-based decisions based on context, to be redundantly redundant. All right, so what does better look like? This is what Dale posed to me, and it's like, so there's kind of a laundry list here, and it's just a single slide, but I use AI every day. Hi, I'm Clint, I'm an addict. But it really does help with writing code and writing scripts, okay? It's really good at that, right? And it's also really good at summarizing documents. But just let me preface all of this by saying, every single one of these, you need human in the loop, okay? Sorry, overlords. But you need human in the loop. You have to have somebody to verify. Like it will do a phenomenal job of writing scripts and write code, but when you run it, there might be bugs, it might do something you don't want. So you kind of know what you're doing a little bit or have somebody that knows what they're doing to go and check it, right? If I use it to summarize documents, threat reports, whatever, don't just take it at face value, right? And there's techniques you can use to increase the accuracy, but it's really good at writing script, looking at writing code. Really good at summarizing documents, okay? Again, how much value is really there, right, from a vendor perspective? I don't know. Writing draft documents, right? It's really cool to have tools that'll write an IR plan draft for you, write policies and procedures for you. It can do it all, but don't spit that out to your CEO and say, okay, we're done, right. And yeah, that's probably, go back to Brian Foster's presentation this morning. That's what's gonna happen if you do that, right? So ultimately, it's a great tool, but does it really add real vendor value? I don't know, it's something you can do yourself. So you can write that script yourself, right? Generating threat scenarios, this is all training, okay? Training, maybe IR triage, IR tabletop, scenario building. This is where AI excels, or generative AI excels, because you want the narrative hallucinating in that perspective, right? You want it to be able to make stuff up. You want it to be creative, okay? So training scenarios, IR scenarios, that's where it really comes in handy, right? So I can see, and I'm not just being, kind of self-purposing, or what's the word for it? I don't know, being I can't think, anyway, I'm not, just because I do it doesn't mean I'm just trying to promote that, right? And, so self-promoting, maybe that's what I'm saying, self-promoting, right? But I do that for a reason, because I found that it works, okay? Providing cybersecurity guidance, again, I think that it is really good for helping people that have no knowledge or no skill, or maybe you're in operations, have been in engineering, if you know nothing about cybersecurity, it can help. But here's the thing. Here is what generative AI is best at. It is best at contextualizing data. It's best at helping you make sense of something that would take too long or too much expertise, more expertise than you have, more resources than you have. So making contextual sense of something, or shortening a task that would take too long. So things like onboarding data, onboarding net new data, correlating tons of nodes in a database. How are my TTPs connected to this vulnerability, connected to this asset? Okay, so things that require a lot of code and a lot of manual transformations or a lot of human hours to do, AI is excellent at that. AI is excellent at helping you reduce time, increase efficiency in tenuous and complex tasks, and making contextual sense of data. That's where it's going to provide value. What does all that mean? Well, I don't have enough time to tell you exactly what all that means, but I think you can infer, AI term, you can infer maybe what that means. But ultimately, those last ones are in bold there because that's the magic. That's the golden egg. Data analysis and correlation, automatically finding correlations and correlating and analyzing data, finding the contextual relationships, all that good stuff, right? So ultimately, it is basically automating and enhancing otherwise repetitive and complex human tasks, augmenting your knowledge, augmenting your skills. It's there to help you, not do your job for you. Obviously, everything needs to have human in the loop, just said that. And so tying it all together, so questions you should ask yourself. Okay? Does generative AI actually, is it necessary to achieve the task? Okay? What the vendor is claiming, is AI really needed for that? Okay? Does it really provide any value? What I'm trying to achieve, or is it just fluff? Okay? Also, ask yourself, does it add any risk to my data, to my production, my company, right? Is it exposing my data? Is there a privacy concern? Okay? Is it giving me bad advice? These things you should consider. Ask yourself. Okay? Questions you should ask the vendor. Why is the AI in your system? Why is it there? What is it actually doing? How is it making your product better? Okay. Hey, can I see your process and data flow? And it's proprietary. I don't need to see it all. But can you show me how it works? Can you maybe for a SOC 2 assertion, can you show me where my data's going? And can you tell me how this thing works? Okay. Are you using frontier models, open source, proprietary models? Okay. Or are you training them? Are you using the raw iterations of them, or are you augmenting that knowledge? Okay. Do you offer on-prem? Or is there an air gap version? Can I prove that you're not sending my data somewhere? Okay. And this is a big one, right? What's the computational power I need to run this thing? Well, I will tell you that in my experience so far, running an Intel processor with 2 RTX 4090s with about 128 to 256 gigs of RAM will run a 70B model fast. It'll run a 405B model sufficiently as long as you don't give it a heavy workload. Okay, so it's not that much. You don't have to go out and buy 100,000 Elon Musk Grok chips in Superman, whatever. Okay, you don't need all that. Okay, so then we already talked about the fine-tuning and augmentation. Do you fine-tune them? Do you use RAG? Or are you just using that raw model and thinking that you're going to fool me? All right. So where did you get your training data from? This is a common one. Can you verify where your training data is from? Or did you actually use a tool to kind of fine tune it out and make sure there's no bias and all that stuff like that? Has your entire system been red team tested? What other vulnerability, like any platform, right? What other vulnerabilities are you introducing to me because you think that you're going to hook me by giving me AI, right? Has there been red teamed, right? As I trip. So how do you keep it updated? Well, it's a big thing. We're in cyber, right? We're using this for cyber. So are we still using October 2021 data like it always says it does, or are we using updated data? How do we know we're getting new data? Right? Vendor, or how are you keeping it updated? How are you keeping it updated with regulations? How are you going to update it with my data, right? So how are you ensuring output accuracy? There's things vendors can do to eliminate hallucinations and ensure accuracy, data accuracy. Are they doing that, right? So as you can see, okay, and how do you handle false positives, okay? How do you know there's false positives? Again, it goes back to those tools, right? Are they checking for that, right? So there's a whole lot of things vendors need to be doing and checking before they just throw an AI solution at you and say, hey, we're AI powered. Right, we're good. Buy us because we're AI powered, right? So real quick, and again, there are vendors out there like that are embracing this, right? So you'll see out there in the startup field. I have no association, no affiliation other than Brian's my friend, and except for that vendor incident, and Harry, they're embracing this technology, right? They're putting it out there, and I think Nozomi's taken the plunge, and I'm trying to think of as many as I can. Freynos, I think Fortress InfoSec is out there doing some of this stuff. So there are vendors out there. I think Industrial Defender at one point was looking into it, and so there are vendors out there that are embracing this and doing it in the right way, right? Darktrace, I like Darktrace's stance. Darktrace has been doing machine learning for a long time. And they've kind of taken the stance, kind of the middle ground between them and Dragos. They're kind of like, we're looking at it, but we're not really ready to take the plunge in generative AI yet because we don't think that all those questions can be answered yet. And that's fair, okay? So there's some good vendors out there. There's some vendors that, I'm going to avoid you in the halls. But don't be afraid of it. Educate yourself. Learn the basics. Have fun with it. That's it. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I think I've only left about 30 seconds for questions. So if we have some questions, quick ones, I'll answer them. Otherwise, I will hang around here and answer questions afterwards.
We have time for a couple questions.
No? Good. All right, thanks.
Just come up to the microphone.
Hello.
Yeah, hi. Where are you at? I can't see you.
Right here on your right, left.
Oh, hey, how are you doing?
Hey, so I have a question about liability or like damages or anything that could go wrong with generative AI. What have you seen vendors kind of provide in their, their terms and conditions? And what do you think is a good terms and conditions a vendor should provide with their AI product?
Yeah, I think, so I'm not a lawyer. I didn't even stay at a Holiday Inn Express. But so standard EULAs, I think right now, I think there's not a lot of precedence for that. So I think what you're seeing is that, like when what I do is I lean on the EULAs of whatever models that I'm using, and then I implement my own privacy policies, my SOC 2 assertions, my GDPR documents. So I'm tacking on a lot of data that covers the standard range of privacy protection and stuff like that. And then we're adding in things like, okay, how are we preventing going to the OWASP LLM top 10, right? And be like, okay, how are we preventing data injection? How are we preventing data and model poisoning? How are we doing that? So we're adding those into our EULA. But in terms of liability and how protected that is and stuff like that, I'm not a lawyer. All I can do is fill out EULAs.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yep. Joe,
Time?
this is going to be a tough one.
No, not a tough one. So, hey Clint, how's it going? So one of the things that I was curious about and wanted you to address, and I'm asking you to address now, is so limited number of actual documented technical data surrounding threats in OT. The basis behind generative AI is you feed it lots of data on an item so it could learn about how those things look. Mm-hmm. So given that disconnect, do you think generative AI really is a suitable technology, given, again, limitations in available data to apply for threat identification or threat evaluation for OT environments?
It goes back to garbage in, garbage out.
Yep.
Right? It is if you can create a model. So remember last year I had an initiative that kind of went silent for a particular reason, where we're creating an OT cybersecurity and OT vendor LLM for that purpose to help. But the point is, there'll be more information on that in a couple months. But the point is that if you feed it the data, if you train it with the data, or you provide augmented data in the form of RAG or a graph database or something like that, you can absolutely fix that garbage in, garbage out problem. But it's a work in progress, right? I mean, which is why I say I would never tell anyone that using a raw model out of the gate in its raw form is going to be acceptable in any industry, especially cybersecurity, and even more so in OT. So yeah, you have to give it the data, train it on the data, and give it augmented data for sure.
Okay, cool, thanks man.
Yep.
This is the last question.
Hey, Clint. Question. What's your thought on false negatives? Because we're saying we're going to take all this data, more and more data, more data than someone's going to have context to look at unless we give them more time than we can to look at it. How do you know that you're finding everything that's there? And how can you build a validator for that so you can test vendor claims when the whole point is that you're building these sets of larger and larger amounts of data where it's going to be difficult to build up all that test data?
So false negatives, okay? I don't not like them. But so one thing that LLMs are really good at is it's a lot better, I said this yesterday in B-Sides, it's a lot better, I think I said it anyway, it's a lot better at identifying what's wrong or correct than it is at creating correct information, okay? I mean, it's pretty good at creating correct information, but you can't trust it, right? So using LLMs, using what's called a self-reflection agent or a verification agent, and if you feed that agent specifically with the correct answers and the correct information that it should be evaluating on, and using that agent, because we could just human evaluate it, right? But there's so much data that it's hard to do. So using a self-reflection or evaluation agent that is fed the proper information and have it check the answers on the original content creation agent, it does a really good job at that, a really good job. And you pair that with a tool like Weights and Balances or Langsmith, Logfire, so that when your developers are going through and developing it and you can actually see the output and check it yourself, the Wonder Twin powers combined of a Weights and Balances tool, a Langsmith tool kind of thing, plus using a properly informed evaluator self-reflection agent, it does a really good job.
Cool, thanks.
Yep. That was the last one. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.